In keeping with her mandate of promoting the protection of human rights in Nigeria, Nigeria's Human Rights Agency, the National Human Rights Commission, NHRC, on Wednesday commenced a 2-day consultative workshop to review the implementation of the United Nations Periodic Review of Human Rights Situation-supported recommendations for Nigeria. In line with the UN's Human Rights Council Resolution 5-1 of 18 June, 2007, National Human Rights Institute of Nations are expected to collaborate with civil society organizations in the preparation of country human rights situation report and monitor the implementation of supported recommendations of the Human Rights Council. In Nigeria, the human rights situation for 2014 to 2018 was reviewed by the United Nations Human Rights Council in November 2018. The Council made 290 recommendations for improving human rights in Nigeria. However, the Nigeria government supported 230. Nigeria's next human rights situation report for 2019 to 2022 will be due for presentation in 2024. In preparation for this presentation, the National Human Rights Commission has brought together key stakeholders to review the level of implementation of the last supported recommendations. Declaring the workshop open, at the Commission's headquarters in Abuja, Nigeria's capital city, the country's chief human rights officer, Barrister Tony Ojukwu said, the workshop will galvanize stakeholders to assess Nigeria's human rights situation.
This workshop is therefore organized to fulfill the statutory role of the National Human Rights Commission in assisting the federal government of Nigeria to ensure the realization of human rights, as well as liaise and collaborate with national and international human rights entities towards enhancing the promotion and protection of human rights in Nigeria. This workshop also seeks to galvanize stakeholders to assess the implementation of the supported recommendations during the UPR and a general review of human rights situation in Nigeria between 2019 and 2022. As you may be aware, Nigeria's human rights situation between 2014 and 2018 was reviewed during the periodic review of the Human Rights Council in November 2018. 290 recommendations were made to Nigeria. Of course, Nigeria accepted 230 of the recommendations and supported those recommendations. Now, there is need to implement the 230 recommendations, and stakeholders are expected to discuss and deliberate.
Speaking on the workshop's expected outcomes, Barrister Ojukwu said,
at the end of the 2-day workshop, the following outcomes are expected: an audit of the human rights situation in Nigeria in the last 4 years, policy recommendations to relevant stakeholders, in particular federal and state governments, as well as the CSOs in the implementation of the supported recommendations during the third cycle of the Universal Periodic Review, an assessment of the country's implementation of the supported recommendations. Of course, those recommendations that have been accepted, we need to give an account of how we have been able to implement those recommendations. Also, harmonization of the outcomes of the proceedings to feed into the independent report of the Commission on Human Rights Situation in Nigeria in the last 4 years, as part of the Human Rights Council documentation to review Nigeria in the first cycle. Nigeria will be due for another review in January, February 2024. So, between now and then is a period of account.
The Commission's Director of Civil and Political Rights, while speaking on the objective of the workshop, said,
so this workshop is to bring together relevant MDA CSOs in Nigeria to assess the implementation of supported recommendations by Nigeria during the third cycle review, to also audit the human rights situation in Nigeria between 2019 and 2022, to identify areas in need of intervention based on the UPR recommendations, also to identify gaps in the enjoyment of human rights in fulfillment of government obligations under its national and international human rights law, and of course, to come up with a factual, independent report to be put together by the National Human Rights Commission in the last 4 years, which will form part of the documentation.
The Chief Judge of the Federal Capital Territory High Court, Justice Hussaini Baba Yusuf, who was represented by Justice Chizoba Orji, assured the Commission of the Judiciary's unflinching support.
The Judiciary and the Human Rights Commission are partners in progress in justice delivery in Nigeria. And the Human Rights Commission has been doing a very good job, and the Judiciary will always support in any way it can anything that concerns the Human Rights Commission, because we are here to deliver justice.
Nigeria's Minister of Women Affairs, Dame Pauline Talon, assured Nigerian women of her ministry's readiness to support all human rights causes for women in the country. Participants at the workshop were drawn from ministries, department and agency, the United Nations system in Nigeria and civil society organizations.
Women's rights is a major part of human rights that cannot be overemphasized. These rights include the right to live free from violence, slavery and discrimination. Over the years, government has intensified actions towards the elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls, with particular focus on sexual and gender-based violence and harmful practices to enable them enjoy their rights. Awareness and sensitization activities, including campaigns, have been carried out by the ministry. Let me reiterate the commitment of the ministry to provide maximum support to Nigerian women and girls towards elimination of all forms of violence and harmful practices, hindering them of enjoying their full rights.
It is hoped that at the end of the 2 days workshop, a harmonized outcome of the proceeding to feed into the independent report of the Commission on the Human Rights Situation in Nigeria will be obtained. DN News, Abuja, North Central Nigeria.